you all for being here this evening. Today I'd like to talk about what I see as four of the sort of fundamental movements of consciousness that we can move towards sitting in meditation as a way to reconnect with our true nature. Yeah? So, very simply, it's basically up, down, back, forward. And in each of those movements, there are practices that sort of line up with those movements. For example, the movement forward as you're sitting in meditation and you're quiet is often experienced by the draw of what people notice as the inner light. So they'll close their eyes, and whether or not they realize it, they're sort of focusing their attention on the third eye. And as they do this, they begin to notice this light that sometimes pulsates or comes closer. And eventually you end up being drawn into that light. And then through that light, you also can move into the source of light, which is the mystery, which is the source of everything in existence. The same, and ultimately that's what enlightenment is really about. There's a lot of talk about what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is ultimately about realizing the transcendent or primordial dimension that is the source for everything in existence, what we call by name God. In moving in the opposite direction, moving backwards, typically how practitioners make that movement beyond or away from the body, the mind, personality, all these things that keep us sort of identified with our ordinary state of consciousness, and to move into the higher consciousness of true nature by first getting in touch with the witness, which is the observing part of the soul, of your individual soul. There's a part, it's always there, watching, observing, never involved in the play of life. It's always there in the background, just observing. And oftentimes you hear people spending years cultivating their ability to access witnessing as a spiritual practice. And part of the reason for that is that witnessing itself is a sort of freedom. It's part of freedom. You need to have the witness awake to live as a spiritually liberated or free person. It plays an important role. But it is through the witness that you can drop back into the same transcendent primordial dimension. So as you cultivate the capacity for witnessing, once you get really good at it, you can also question or sort of inquire into the source of the witness, and that leads you directly to the divine. The other two movements are up and down. Up is by raising your energy level. You have to, in some sense, have a way to lift up your energy, lift up your vibration. And some people are just better at doing that than others. It's a sort of a subtle skill to learn how to sort of raise your vibration. There's practices like Kundalini Yoga, you're using fundamental energy at the root chakra, purifying it and helping to lift that up so that it will take your consciousness with you and lift you up into the higher self, which is our direct connection to the divine as well. All of us have a higher self, it's above us. If we lift our consciousness up into our higher self, we merge with the divine. We have great meditation. The other way that I often talk about is the use of inner sound to facilitate that process as well. And if we learn to listen to our consciousness, we'll notice that our ordinary consciousness has sounds. It makes all kinds of sounds. When we move beyond the realm of thought and we just tune into the sound of our consciousness, it rumbles and gurgles, makes all kinds of sounds in that. And if we develop a sensitivity for listening to our consciousness, we can also develop the sensitivity to listen to our higher self and higher consciousness, which has a very distinct tone. And as soon as we're able to hear that tone, it draws us up. pulls us right up into our higher self. The sound carries us up and out. And by the way, all the movements are always into and then out. So you move forward and out. You move backwards and out. You move up and out. And the same with the downward movement, which is also, I think, maybe more familiar to people, at least in terms of their understanding of sitting in meditation in order to cultivate stillness and dropping into the stillness. And as you drop into, as you're sitting in meditation and everything gets quiet, if you just allow yourself to sink into that silence, that brings you down into beingness itself, which is something that we all have, but we're not fully aware of it usually. Instead, it gets forgotten about as we live our ordinary daily lives. So as we drop down, we drop into beingness, and it's the same thing. When you drop into beingness, ultimately you realize that not only, or all you ever were and ever are was beingness, playing the life of you as the individual, but that beingness itself is the source for all other beings, and in fact, everything in existence. Everything is a manifestation of beingness. And so it's the same sort of end realization, which is what non-duality is ultimately all about. It's this understanding that there's a source of existence, that we can connect with that source. And when we connect with that source, not only do we realize who and what we are beyond our forms as individuals, but it also then opens us up to becoming an individual expression of the divine in a way. And that's what the spiritual maturation process of awakening or enlightenment is all about.